Hey friends, I'm Sharon Betters, and this is the Daily Treasure podcast produced by Mark Inc. Ministries. And I am so happy to welcome Tammy Maltby as our guest writer for these next 2 weeks in our series of A Steadfast Woman in a Shifting World. These devotionals are adapted from her book, The God Who Sees You. Look to Him when you feel discouraged, forgotten, or invisible. So today's devotional is called A Vision for Trauma's Aftermath, and today's treasure is, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army which I sent among you. Joel 2:25. I believe with my whole heart that God always sees us, always loves us, and is actively, redemptively involved in our lives at any given point, even when terrible, awful things have turned our lives upside down. No, God doesn't typically intervene directly and remove the struggles in our lives. No, He doesn't always act in ways we can understand. That's where all those discussions about humanity's free will and God's sovereignty come in. I absolutely believe, however, that what we've learned about the God who sees us remains true even when life turns upside down. No matter what the trauma, God can be trusted to bring comfort in the short term and restoration in the long run, plus surprising gifts in the midst of our pain. I've also seen too much pain to insist that any of this comes easily. Trauma is real and damaging. God's mercy can be severe. Sometimes the truth only becomes real and sure to you as you live through it, or as you see it in someone else's eyes. Which brings us back to the how question. How do you get past one of those times of trauma, those times of need? How do you trust God when it feels like He's let you down? How do you even want to? When you've been hurt, when you're confused, when the worst is supposed to be over, but the problems stick like cockleburrs, hope can be the last thing you want to want. Sometimes it hurts too much to hope, especially when you suspect your life will never be the same again. Sometimes God sees you can feel like a bitter reality instead of an encouraging one. So, is there a way to move forward? Is it worth the effort to rebuild your lives? That's exactly the dilemma the nation of Judah faced many thousands of years ago. They brought a lot of their trouble on themselves by ignoring the prophets, by worshiping false gods, by breaking their covenant with Yahweh. But still, the events that rocked their world were shocking and painful. First, their land was invaded by foreigners. Their best and brightest young people were carted away to serve the king of Babylon. Then the whole nation, men, women, and children, was taken into captivity. People were forced from their homes and into exile. Solomon's beautiful temple was burned to the ground. Before they knew what was happening, God's people found themselves, quite literally, in a foreign land. They established homes and raised children. They found ways to make a living. They were still exiles, still far from home, still suffering the trauma of displacement. They were probably wondering whether it was a good thing that God had seen them, whether He saw their present need, or whether there was anything worthwhile in their future. And then came good news. The Persian king Cyrus, who had conquered Babylon, agreed to let the Jews go home and rebuild their temple. 40,000 Jews followed a governor named Zerubbabel and the high priest Joshua back to Jerusalem to begin getting their lives back. They even laid the foundations for rebuilding the temple. Then the work stalled. Some lost interest when they realized the new temple wouldn't be as beautiful as the first one. Some were preoccupied with personal projects. Drought hit the land, harvests were poor, and the people who had occupied the country in the Jews' absence kept stirring up trouble. Progress on the temple ground came to a halt. No work was done in the temple for 18 years, and no one even seemed to care. And we can read this story in Ezra 3-6, Haggai 1, Zechariah 4 and 8. Once again, God cared. He wanted to restore His people more than they even wanted to be restored, and more than they believed was possible. He sent 2 prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, to Zerubbabel with very specific messages for him and his priest partner Joshua. They are messages that have helped me hope and I think they may resonate for anyone asking why questions and how questions of the God who sees us. First, God assured Zerubbabel through the visions of Zechariah that there would be restoration and life would be good again for God's people. The temple would be built, safety and prosperity would return, as we read in Zechariah 8:4 and 12. Once again, men and women of ripe old age will sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each with cane in hand because of his age. The city streets will be filled with boys and girls playing there. The seed will grow well, the vine will yield its fruit, the ground will produce its crops, and the heavens will drop their dew. I will give all these things as an inheritance to the remnant of this people. Second, God made it clear that he was the one who would do all the heavy lifting in this restoration. He saw his people and had not forgotten them. The name Zechariah actually means God remembers. He was going to make it happen, and restoration will be his gift, as we read in Zechariah 4:6, "Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty." At the same time, there were things Zerubbabel and Joshua and all the people had to do. They needed to pull together and do what they could, even if their contribution seemed too small and the possible outcomes not worth the effort. Speaking of the temple, God said in Haggai 2, verses 3 through 5, "Who of you is left who saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Does it not seem to you like nothing? But now be strong, O Zerubbabel. Be strong, O Joshua. Be strong, all you people of the land, and work, for I am with you." And Zechariah 4:10, "Who despises the day of small things? Men will rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel." Finally, God made it clear that there was a purpose for all this restoration. It wasn't just to make God's people happy again, but to make his people a blessing to others, as we read in Zechariah 8:13. "As you have been an object of cursing among the nations, O Judah and Israel, so will I save you, and you will be a blessing." Haggai and Zechariah were sent to Zerubbabel and Joshua for a single purpose, to stir up their hope after trauma and get them moving again toward new, better lives. God wanted to assure them that he saw them and that good things lay ahead. I think that's a word we need when trauma has been part of our lives. It's the place to start. The word from the Lord that makes moving forward possible. And from there, we can take it a little farther. No one person can give another a foolproof guide for surviving painful times in our lives. People are just too different. And the God who sees each of us individually deals with us in different ways. Over the next few days, I will share just a few of the keys I've discovered that seem to make a big difference in making it through a traumatic time. Perhaps one of them will help a fellow traveler recognize the God who sees is ever present in her life as well. And oh, Father Elroy, the God who sees, we need you to show us your presence in the mundane and the majestic moments of life, but we're more desperate to know you see us in those dark, broken places. Friends, thanks so much for joining us for the Daily Treasure podcast. And as always, I want to introduce you to other resources that are designed to help turn your heart toward Jesus. And so today, I want to remind you about our Help and Hope podcast, where we talk about life crises that are really difficult to discuss, sometimes experience in isolation. And our topic for this podcast is postpartum depression. Did you know that one recent study found that 1 in 7 women may experience postpartum depression in the first year after giving birth? With approximately 4 million live births occurring annually in the United States, this equates to almost 600,000 postpartum depression diagnoses, and this does not account for miscarriages or for women who have had a stillbirth. You know, not so long ago, postpartum depression was not recognized as a real medical crisis for a mother. Rather, she was often told to shake it off or pull it together with no sympathy. After all, she was a new mother. Why wasn't she happy? Fortunately, today, postpartum depression is recognized as a real illness, a real physical crisis. And friends, there is hope. My guest today is Christine Chappell, and she knows what it is to experience postpartum depression. Christine is a counselor, a writer, a speaker, a wife, a mom, and a podcast host. I hope that you will go to markinc.org, that's markinc.org, and look for my conversation with Christine Chappell on postpartum depression. I know that you are going to be encouraged by the way Christine shares her story and the hope that she experienced through her relationship to Jesus. Again, that's markinc.org, markinc.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to being with you tomorrow.